Good evening and welcome. It's good to have you with us this evening for this Successor 6th webinar. My name's Andrew Jackson. I'm one of the associate principals, and Paul Wilson, our principal, is with us this evening as well. Just to say the way that the evening is going to go, Paul will give a brief introduction, and then I will give a little bit of an idea of some of the work that we do with students to support their studies and help them to develop a positive and a growth mindset. We are going to try and take Q&A, as we'll do some of that as we go along, if it fits in with the theme as we're doing, but most of it we will do at the end. And obviously, in this forum, it makes sense for those questions to be of a general nature rather than around individual students, where obviously the best thing to do would be to direct them to individual staff, and we'll explain that as we go along. So obviously, the upside of the webinar is that you haven't had to rush home and rush back out of the house and come into college. And so hopefully that's been helpful. And obviously, in the current COVID world, it makes a lot of sense. The downside is the slight jeopardy of technical disruption. We're hopeful that that won't happen. If it does, bear with us. If it's a short-lived technical hit, we'll aim to get back in and get on as quickly as we can. And if something catastrophic happens, then what we'll have to do is we'll reconvene and reschedule for another evening. But we're hopeful that won't happen. So, without further ado, I will pass across to Paul.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm just going to do the first bit of technical thing and try and share my screen with you so that you have a presentation. So rather than just looking at me, we've got some other information on slides, and I'll talk to that as we go. But as Andrew says, a very warm welcome to everybody. So it's a wonderful attendance. We've got a good number of people here, so welcome everybody. And as Andrew says, we'll try and take a range of questions as we go and try and respond to them in groups of questions if we possibly can. And anything we don't get to, we'll pick up and try and put information out to parents as a separate matter afterwards as well. So that's how we intend to do it. I'll see if I can share my presentation with you, and hopefully Andrew will give me the nod that that's sharing okay. Can you see that all right? Yeah, good. Okay, so I guess the first thing to say, as Andrew's just suggested, is we do this every year, and it's a really important evening for us, really, because in many respects this is our first contact with you as parents directly and carers of the students that have chosen to be with us, other than through the application process. And of course, they're now here with us, and this is really an important starting point for us to build a set of relationships with you and your sons and daughters, and to really hopefully help them push on and be really successful, as I'm sure they're going to be. This year, of course, as Andrew said, is very different. We're doing an awful lot of this, and we're becoming hopefully quite successful at getting the technology to work. And hopefully it works for you. But of course, if there's anything that doesn't work for you in terms of questions and things you want to find out about, there's always the opportunity to follow up afterwards, and we'll certainly try and respond to that. Hopefully you'll get everything you need from this. Some of you obviously will know the college quite well. I'm certain some of you attending are parents of former students of the college. And indeed, given our long and rich history, it's distinctly possible some of you have got a very, very personal connection with the college, and may even have been through the college in years gone by as well. So if that's you, a very warm welcome back. And others, of course, will be completely new to us. And our intention, Andrew and I, this evening is to try and cater for all of those audiences if we possibly can, and to make sure there's something in this evening for all of you. And as we've suggested, if there are things you think we're not covering that you particularly want to ask us to cover, use the chat box and pose the questions for us, and we'll try and respond to those in flexible ways. We're get the my PowerPoint isn't down because I'm not sure why that's happening. Right. So unfortunately, I've had to close the question box. So if you ask questions, I can't see them at the moment. So Andrew will probably pick those up and summarise for me. So I've had to close that to get the progression of the slides to go down. So We think we're a very, very special place, and there'll be many reasons why you and your sons and daughters have chosen WQE as the right place for the next step in their education. And undoubtedly one of those reasons will have been the really unrivaled curriculum offer that we've got. But when students progress into their post-16 education, almost certainly they're ready to specialise and to do the things that most motivate them and most interest them, and just as importantly, help them get into their careers and follow the dreams that they have in the future. And our curriculum offer certainly enables our students to match their abilities, their interests and their career together, and knit all that together and choose a programme of study that hopefully addresses all of the things that they want to achieve in the future. And it's certainly the case that when you do that, you tend to be very, very successful, particularly when you're working in a specialist organisation. We've got highly skilled and specialist teachers. We're very large, and most of those staff are complete specialists in their fields. And so that's also a driver around why your sons and daughters will be successful. What's probably an important thing to take away from this evening is that they're going to spend a lot more time with their teachers than they traditionally would have done in a school setting where the curriculum is a much broader range of subjects. So they're on the whole choosing a much narrower range of choices, as I've described, choices that they're in groups where everybody's chosen them because they're interested in them, because they are hopefully heading somewhere career-wise for them. But they're spending a lot of time with those students and those staff all together. So that's another really big reason why students tend to be very, very successful with us. And as you can see from the information on the slides, almost everybody passes. And this year was quite an exceptional year, but of course, but part of the algorithms that we've heard so much about are they were a reflection of the way in which the past performance of an organisation would have enabled young people to get particular outcomes and particular grades. And as you can see, not only did almost everybody get pass grades, but 77% of students were awarded the top grades at A level in particular, and distinctions as well in terms of the vocational programmes. One little known and particularly big strength of the college is our support in helping young people who actually not achieved one of the most crucial qualifying qualifications, if you like, the maths and English GCSEs. That's so essential for their future progression. And sometimes our students have not got one of them to put together in a programme, and we've got a tremendous amount of success having in terms of helping young people achieve those qualifications. There was a point in a couple of years ago where we're the highest performing organisation in the country at that, and we're always in and around that level, and generally around double the national averages in terms of helping convert students who've not previously managed to achieve those. So that's one of our greatest strengths. It can be relatively smaller numbers of students compared to the range of A level and the advanced qualifications that we do. But it is a particularly important qualification, and all of those things come together really to help our students pursue some of the very best universities, some of the very best courses, and most importantly, pursue careers as young professionals. And we're through the course of their time with us, we'll spend a lot of time talking about becoming young professionals, really, because the other things we're describing are courses, their qualifications, their certificates. But actually a bigger part of our job is helping them become really skilled, really experienced young adults that are really ready for the world of work, be that straight after their time at WQE or more commonly after they've progressed through university, and we're helping them take those stepping stones. And as you can see from the slide, very, very high numbers of students are entering the very top courses. But we've actually got the full spectrum of students who will progress into a whole range of different courses as well. But as you can see, some very notable ones in terms of the medicine and Oxbridge students there, and Russell Group University progression as well. And that doesn't happen without a really strong culture and a strong environment and a genuine aspiration for students to achieve the very, very best they can. And that's very much what the college is all about. We genuinely start on day one expecting them to do well and driving them to do well. And we make no apology actually for the times when we push them really hard and sometimes beyond their feet, the extent to which they feel comfortable. And we will push them quite hard, and there'll be times potentially where you as parents and carers need to support us in that to get the sorts of outcomes that I've shown you there on the screen, and it becomes very, very much a partnership between us all. Probably be wrong for me to not cover some aspects of what we're doing in terms of the return in a very unusual environment nationally, and much of this we've shared with parents and students at earlier stages. We've been doing this incrementally, but we've got really extensive systems of control, and the college took particular decisions in the summer term about how we wanted to approach our return in the autumn, and we took the decision to look at ways in which we could minimise the extent to which students would cross over and interact on any particular day or in any particular event with multiple people. So central to what we're doing is they visit the college for a purpose each day, and that's generally speaking the main purpose, and on some occasions they have two things in a day, but that's rare. And essentially we ask them to sit in a very structured set of arrangements where they're near the same people all of the time, and so where some schools have gone into a model where there's class group bubbles and year group bubbles, we've gone further than that, and we've separated them into local seating bubbles, if you like, and that's paid real dividends, frankly, in the early weeks of term, and we took some very gentle, steady steps in terms of the return to college in very small groups, half groups, and that was not so much because of the social distancing and the COVID issues, but we wanted students who've spent, in some cases, 6 months or more not in learning to get some really good quality time with their teachers in small groups and to meet other students in relatively small groups. So whilst that had a spin-off in terms of the sort of the safety and the controls while we were training students and getting them into some good habits about how we wanted things to happen, the primary purpose for that was that we're in a relationships business, and they're going to spend a lot of time with these people, and getting to know them in a smaller group was a big part of what we did. So that's what we tried to do during our induction phase. Beyond their main curriculum, obviously, as you'll know by now, we've extended that now to extend the amount of time they're spending when they visit the college on any particular day, and we're now beginning to ratchet that up inevitably as we enter the third week of our term, and that will continue to build in terms of the work expectations now of students and the things that staff are expecting them to do. So you should expect to see the volumes of work significantly increase as we progress from this point, really. Students have got access to book spaces on site. So again, we've got systems of control around booking a particular PC, a particular location, and we've got a range of external social areas that we're encouraging the use of, and waiting areas and spaces in the college, which we've got a range of controls and distancing students. For example, we've got grab and go dining spaces, but we've also got seating arrangements in those where students can sit in pairs, and we clean down all of the tables and the desks in those.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah, Andrew.
There's one question that's come in that you might want to pick up just at this moment. It says, we've appreciated the phased approach. Our daughter says the college feels very safe. Do you have any plans to move to 100% face-to-face teaching at any point in this academic year?
It's a very good question, that one. So, of course, our aspiration is that. The benefit, of course, of not doing that, and we deliberately planned, even when we were doing effectively the half model of on-site work, is we've designed a model that can flex upwards and downwards. So it's effectively the three elements of our curriculum. There's the on-site work, which we want to be the maximum at the time we spend with our students. There's the directly teacher-led and teacher leading the session, if you like, a lesson online. And then there's the online virtual learning environment, the activities that those teachers will set as well. So it's what we call a blended approach, and they should, in our perfect world, be maximum face-to-face on site, some of the other online activity and sessions being operated and maintaining contact through that, not least because some students will have to isolate, some people will have circumstances where they can't come into college, and that gives them a guaranteed access point to their teachers. And so we don't want to lose that element until such a point as the world has moved into a completely different phase around COVID, and there's vaccines and things like that that are beginning to significantly reduce the risk. So we want to retain that constant point at which even students that are isolating or not with us or are unwell at any stage can directly access their group learning online. But ultimately, we can flex that model. Those different elements can grow and contract depending on the national circumstances, and we're acutely aware that that's quite important. Recent headlines, of course, state the need for us to constantly keep an alert on that and to be keeping that under review. But our aspiration is to do the maximum amount on site, and whilst retaining the opportunity and the connectivity with students throughout that on a weekly basis, so they can very easily flip into different ways and not lose any learning as a result of that. So hopefully that answers that question. And our success in the early few weeks of term in terms of managing students and as Andrew said, students generally feeling very, very safe in the way they're going about things and being very sensible, gives us real confidence actually that the step we've just taken is very sustainable. So that's where we are at the moment, and certainly for the foreseeable future up to half term, it's unlikely that model will change now. We want to get a degree of stability, and we want to retain that opportunity to flex in online and keep students involved in that if we possibly can. So a range of reasons really why we're doing that, but it's a really good question, certainly. So if I just move on, one of the things we normally say to students at this stage when we're face to face is, and for the record, I've been doing this. I think I've done 8 or 9 of these with our students, inviting them to come and have a Q&A with me as well. And what things we're stressing is it is really different in college. And one of the reasons students chose to be at WQE is the sense that they're going to get a greater degree of independence, the sort of freedoms and responsibilities that will help them develop into and seize those freedoms and responsibilities in really mature ways is part of why they've chosen to be at our college. And massively driving their decisions undoubtedly is they're in an environment with like-minded young people just like themselves. We've got many thousand students, indeed, actually nearly 3,500 students in total across all of what we do. But they're separated into smaller clusters across their curriculum range and so on. But they're with people that have chosen the same courses, the same interests, have the same passions. They've probably got the same career interests. And they're working with specialist teachers that are just as passionate about those things, and that makes for a really different environment. It means you can approach teaching and learning really differently, and clearly we're having to approach teaching and learning really differently to the ways we've ever done it before by the sort of blended approach that we've just talked about. But there are some huge benefits in that, and because one of our experiences over the last 6 months is our students did particularly well actually in terms of managing the independence that went with having to study at home. And we're, as a relatively large organisation, we've been really well equipped to do that and to support students with that. And our technological infrastructures have been helpful in doing that. But equally, the mindsets of our students and the ways they work together has enabled them to be really successful through that phase. And again, it comes back to the question that I just responded to. There are actually some real positives about putting groups together in an online session and doing things in different ways that actually have helpful aspects from a teaching and learning point of view as well. So we're certainly clear that they're going to work differently, but they're certainly going to meet a lot of people. And one of the things that we want to really encourage them to do is meet more people, even though some of that might be through different means. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. But there are huge amounts of opportunities, and undoubtedly, when you were choosing the college, you'd have chosen it for some of those reasons. I suppose the realities of this is the time we've got working with them academically is quite short, and we effectively there's 37 weeks ultimately in an academic year. Of course, we're in the 3rd one of those already, and certainly by if they're in an exam year, it's not 37 weeks until their exam. So the time we get to spend is short. So the strength of those relationships really matters, and we want to encourage them to be able to do an awful lot beyond the college. The realities are we can't teach your sons and daughters everything they'll need to know. They've got to extend beyond the curriculum and become quite independent. So we spend a lot of time working with them on those things, and Andrew will talk about that in his part of the presentation that we'll do. I guess ultimately most of what I'm encouraging you to engage in now is this partnership, what we call a triangle between the college staff, your sons and daughters, and you as parents and carers, because in many respects, whilst they're kind of progressing through the age ranks of their education, lots of people assume they need us less. And actually, it's almost the opposite of that. What we're beginning to do is give them more independence and give them the opportunity to make mistakes in a relatively supported and scaffolded way. And of course, that requires people to catch them when they kind of slip a little bit and need to support them back. And again, Andrew will talk about that in a moment. But the one thing I want to say before he does that is that you're a massive part of that. It's really important that you're engaged with us and that you're supporting all the major moments of decision, but you're also working with us to help with the wobbles, because one thing's absolutely certain, there'll be wobbles along the way. It's quite challenging being a post-16 student, and the level of the study that they're engaged in now is hard. So they're going to need us, and they're going to need us to be talking to each other and at times talking together with them. So whatever you think about their sort of dash for freedom, we've got to help them with that while still being there when they need us. And of course that's rooted in having good ongoing relationships with each other when we're not needed. So I'd encourage you to work in that way and keep in touch with us as you go, even for the little reasons as much as anything else. I've certainly sent out some postcards to you. Hopefully you've received those. I think we're going to send out a postcard with these people's details on them to you. Yeah, I just wanted to introduce our executive team, because we've got a group of 6 of us that effectively lead the college, and the other 5 do an awful lot on my behalf, and lots of the communication, for example, you've had from Andrew, and other moments you'll have contact through people like Donna in particular, in terms of the pastoral and welfare structures. And Andrew leads our PPM systems, and we'll talk about that at the moment. And then we've got two senior colleagues that lead primarily the curriculum and the learning functions across the college, the academic aspects of our college, which is Tim Cullen and Sarah Oldfield, and supporting me with the things that you often don't see, which are things like risk management controls and COVID registers, and how we're managing all those things in the background is Carolyn Davis. So Carolyn's been particularly busy over the recent weeks and months with us developing those things. So we're a team, and genuinely you can talk to any of those people, and they will all be able to respond on my behalf and deal with things as they arise with you. The key is to try and be pointed to the right people in the wider system, frankly, and Andrew will talk a little bit more again about the wider systems that we've got to do that. So clearly, we lead that, but often the solutions are more operationally driven, with the teacher, with the personal progress mentor, with the heads of studies, or the welfare and skills specialists and teams that we've got. So the key is to look out for those people as well. But we're here if you really need us to help out in other ways, or other things that you need to feed back to us. So I've said a lot about the importance of independent learning, and of course there's the systems and structures and facilities for that independent learning, and of course there's some real differences at the moment. We're having to manage those really differently. Our capacity, of course, has been curtailed in that, because we're trying to manage those in more controlled ways and with greater levels of restrictions. But we've got vast amounts of IT facility and study centres, three particularly large ones, and then smaller areas as well, and that students can access and use. And we've got a booking facility for that, and students are beginning to do that. And we recognise they can't all travel home and can't all move around in between some of their on-site things and their online things, and we've been encouraging them to use the facilities we've got there when they need them for that. The personal progress mentor, the PPM as they're commonly known, is your go-to person, and a really important person to support you and your sons and daughters in terms of the wider development through the college. They're settling in. If they've got more general concerns, for example, if they're ill, or there's health challenges, or there's support needs that we need to get involved in early, that perhaps cut across the curriculum more generally, that an individual subject teacher might not be the person to respond to, but they need an advocate, or they need somebody to guide them to the right parts of our system. And that counts for you as parents and carers too. The PPM is your go-to person. And if you contact the college and mention your son or daughter's name, they'll be the reception staff or the colleagues that speak to you will be able to tell you who the PPM is that you might need to talk to. So remember that phrase, the PPM, because if you need to know something, that's the person to ask for first, I think, ultimately. And so be mindful of that. And your son or daughter will now be able to tell you who that is as well, so you don't need to wait and ask reception for that. Traditionally, of course, we've used what we call a core day model, and of course that's slightly defunct at the moment, because the core day is the subject that they've come in for. But generally speaking, in a sixth form college, and this might happen and hopefully will happen, we have a more cross-cutting mixture of subjects across a day, with free periods intertwined with that. And we generally expect our students to be here from the first thing they're required to be here for,
through to the last thing that they're required to be here for, and to use everything in between as their core study time. And actually that principle still applies in terms of working at home. They need to try and define good habits as a core day and manage themselves constructively through that particular process, and try not to sort of let their day become disjointed if they possibly can. I'm going to say more about personal development in a moment. All of the things I've talked about in terms of...
Well, can I just jump in at that point?
Yep, good.
Right.
Yep.
There's some questions, because there's a theme around when will enrichment start?
Yep.
And there's also a theme around if a student can't get home in time for an online lesson, what should they do? And facilities seem to be booking up quite quickly.
Yes, and we're monitoring and reviewing that. And actually, there are facilities. Just sometimes our booking system has made it look like there haven't been. So students who've been queuing up for those have been able to access them on the whole. So we're looking at what's caused that, and resolving that. But generally, students who've needed those facilities on site when they come and ask them, those study centres have been able to access them. It seems to be a glitch in the way that some of the facilities are blocking that we've had a look at, but there are lots, and generally there's been capacity for that, and we're encouraging them to stay if they can't get home, obviously. It's also entirely possible to access those sessions using mobile devices as well, where they can do that. I know students that have sat outside on an iPad or on their phones even, and sat in, the weather's been great, and they've been able to do those sessions in that way with their headphones in as well, which has been their choice to do that, but some of them have found that particularly helpful as well. Andrew, remind me of the other question again.
When's enrichment likely to start?
Yeah, and enrichment, I'm going to come on to enrichment and the wider development, but effectively enrichment is the next phase that we're going to be building into timetables, and enrichments will work differently depending on their nature. So clearly, it's likely that we'll be able to offer sporting participation when, in particular, where it's outdoors and where national governing bodies have got controls and systems that enable that. So we'll be encouraging students to get involved in some of those sporting activities. In other ways, we're likely to start it online and potentially look at ways in which we can bring smaller clusters in to do elements of that work in those ways as well. So that's the next step for us, really, to bring those in the next week or two. So they should be within student timetables and beginning to happen and working up. And there are lots of other aspects. That's the formal enrichment that's timetable, but I'm going to talk in a moment about some of the wider other opportunities, because this student experience is a big part of why people have chosen to be at the Wqe and those wider opportunities as well. So the slide up at the moment is primarily about the importance of attendance. And actually, attendance has been absolutely fabulous since the start of term. We've been really impressed, actually. We didn't know quite what to expect, and we've been really pleased that people are attending, and they're attending on time, and we've been really, really impressed, actually, with that. We knew there might be difficulties with transport and getting dropped off, and mums and dads having to organise things, but you've done a fabulous job if that's how you've been helping, and students have certainly managed to get to us and be able to attend things. It makes a massive difference to performance. Ultimately, we could share, if we had more time, we could share statistics around those things, but we know the #1 factor that will determine performance starts by being their attendance, we know students who attend well generally are students who pass and achieve highly. The PPM structure is where you can talk to the person responsible ultimately for your young person about particular issues that might affect their capacity to attend. And we've got phone lines that you can use, and we expect you to use, or them to use, frankly, actually, because they're the young adult, to phone in and to justify their absence and explain that and note that on the day of an absence. And we've got a specialist dedicated one for COVID-related matters as well. So there's a particular number of students that will all be given that, and I think we've communicated that out to parents and carers as well. Andrew's done that for us as well. So there's a dedicated number that will kind of fast track you through if that's necessary in terms of COVID-related isolation or needing tests and things like that. So that's an important part of it as well. Please don't, if ever it's clear, what we've just been through in the last 12 months now, we'll say don't miss things, don't miss work, don't miss assessments, don't go on holiday at an inappropriate time during term time and things like that. And we've always said that as an education institution has become massively important, and of course, what we've just dealt with in terms of the results processes has been really important in that. The students that were ahead and have got things done and have been able to really evidence their performance very strongly definitely did very, very well. and it just gets more difficult if you've missed things and you've had time out as well. So we're certainly encouraging that. And of course, part of being a good positive adult is to recognise that it messes up your group if you join in late or you turn up late and disrupt things. So teachers can, they can expect them to be quite grumpy about that, and we don't discourage them being quite grumpy about that, to be honest. I could go through in detail the Wqe commitment. It's on our website. It's available to you. It frankly tells you the things that we commit to doing to make sure that we're a very positive, high-performing organisation that's safe, that students love being a part of, and that we support them through the journey from the day they apply, through their enrolment, through their curriculum and the delivery of their course, their wider development that you just asked questions about, and through into being these young professionals ultimately, be that through progression to university or into the world of work. So we try and build all the partnerships and infrastructures that we need to deliver on that for you, and that's essentially what we're about. So there's a whole document about that if you want to read that as well. So coming on to those other activities, so I've mentioned enrichment, so I won't dwell any more on that. One of the things I've been saying to students in the group activities is that we've always had a culture of student-led societies where students actually come up with their ideas about the stuff that they're interested in and want to find other students that have got those sorts of interests too. And that can be from a debating society. We've had dentists and medics set up their own societies. We've had Dungeons and Dragons kind of societies as well, all sorts of gaming societies, and obviously all the sports activities, religious groupings and societies who want to work together, Christian societies and the like, and I think we've got a society for most key religions there as well, and so there's a whole range of ways in which students can meet and engage and interact with other young people. The one thing we're saying this year more than ever is they should be even more proactive about setting up those societies, because if they're interested in it, in a student body of several thousand people, they're going to find friends that are interested in that too. And we've got a student services centre that will help them set up a society, and even if that's so they want to choose a charity and want to find people that want to support that with them, we've got an infrastructure where they can do that. So in terms of students that are coming into a new environment and want to meet people, they're brilliant ways in which they can engage, and that can still happen online. And then they'll get the opportunity ultimately to meet in small clusters in other ways, and we'll support that as well. So I'd really encourage that. And we've got a really active student executive as well, and they're elected into post, and they represent our student body, and they do an awful lot for the student body as well. So there's a huge amount of opportunities there that we'd encourage them to get involved in. So if you think they're looking like it's all a bit new and they haven't necessarily met lots of people yet, which is simply possible when lots of it's online, then suggest those things to them, and we can help them do that. And we've talked to them already about that in the presentations I've done already. I'm going to wind that up now, really, with messages that hopefully you saw in our prospectus, really. But most of what I've been describing is about our ambitions for your sons and daughters, and our desire that they're as ambitious as that too. We want to inspire them to be the very best that they can be through great quality teaching and learning, and supporting them. We want them to help be these young professionals that are responsible, ready for the world, that take personal responsibility, are independent, know how to organise themselves, and are self-starters. That ultimately ready for their next steps. Ultimately, and we're preparing for that. And we talk all the time about them being extraordinary, and it's an often misunderstood statement that we make, because ultimately we're really preparing the building blocks. People often assume that being extraordinary means you have to be our highest performing student. And actually what we're trying to do is find the little bit of special aspect of your son or daughter that they want to develop and they want to make special about themselves. And that can be absolutely anything. It doesn't have to be their academic performance. And we know from past experience that students don't necessarily find that extraordinary, don't necessarily find it and believe in that until much later on in their lives. And they often root that back to their experiences with us. If they get involved, if they try and nurture the things they're most passionate about, ultimately they will be the things that help them be extraordinary people and make extraordinary contributions. And that's what we want to work with you to do, to help them be great successes in the future. So I'm going to wind up there. I'm sure there's lots of questions that I can't see, and Andrew might throw a few more in there for me, but ultimately he's got some things to talk about as well, which might cover some of those. So great to have the opportunity to meet you, and keep in touch with us all the way through. So I'll stop that share screen. Hopefully Andrew will pick that up.
Yeah, across to me. Obviously, I'm trying to answer a few of the questions as we've gone along, and I've been trying to type the answer to a few that have come up. The ones that are still on the side, some of them I will try and cover in the information that I'm going to give now, and then the rest of them we'll pick up at the end. My ability to multitask fails at the point at which I'm trying to say something and read from the side of the screen at the same time, so you'll have to bear with me on that one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to talk through some of the work that we will do with students in their time, certainly through the first year with us, and that we think it will be helpful for you to know about. And so some of the things that they're talking about, particularly with their personal progress mentor, and increasingly in their subjects as well. It's helpful to know the sorts of language that we're using, and so that at home you're able to fit in and kind of answer and use some of the same things. So we hope that one of the things that students will develop with us, if they haven't got it already, is this idea of a growth mindset, of being not fixed in one place, but open to challenge, to growth, to change, and to be resilient in terms of their ability to cope with things as they go along. So, as I'm sure you don't need me to tell you, coming from school to college, it is one of those moments in life, a real time to grow. There are challenges along the way and real opportunities to be grasped. One of the first bits of work that we do with students is to put this graph in front of them and try and get them to think, what will their emotional journey be like as they go through from the start of term with us and through to the end of the first year, and then on into the rest of their studies with us. And we suggest to them that their time with us might go something like this. The first few days can be quite overwhelming. It can be quite a shock to a new environment. And one of the things that we think it's important to say to students is actually that's just entirely normal. That's fine, and we'll help you through that. We've helped many a student along this journey in the past, and we will help many in the future, and they'll absolutely be fine. We also had a little bit of a joke with them that shortly after that stage comes the stage when quite a number of students then think, right, I've got everything sorted, I know exactly what I'm doing, I am the world's expert in this now, and I don't need any help whatsoever, and I'm just going to reject all offers of that. For some, that lasts until they're 21. Some come through that and start to be more self-doubting in some ways. And so we talk through with them the various emotions and things that they might be thinking, and to say to them, actually, that's entirely normal. Recognize these things in yourself. It's fine. But the main message that we want to give is that students do come through that. They come through those moments of anxiety, those moments when they're a bit all at sea, and in what we like to joke with them is an emotional fog. Quite often comes on a Wednesday afternoon, I find, but we talk to students about with strategies about how to get through that, and then we want to encourage them that actually the students do come through that and come through into those acceptance. Right, it is what it is. I'm just going to get on with it. They try different things out, find out what happens, what works, and then get into this getting on with it phase. We would also say to them that that's an idealized picture, if you like, and for some students they will go up and down quite a few times as they go. But we'll be there to help them and support them as they do that. So we would then go through with them a bit more detail on what those different stages are. I'm not going to draw that out at the moment, but that's just there for you to have reference to. We'll make sure these things are available on the parent carer section of our website later. So that's the sorts of descriptions that we'll give to students and say, actually, you know, don't panic if you feel like this. A number of students will just talk to us and we'll help you with it and support you through it. And then we also do some work with them where we talk to them about the sort of language that we might use with them in order to support them. And you know, so you may find some of these helpful, you might find some of them try to not helpful, but take what's useful. But what we're all the time trying to say to students is that in our opinion, it is possible to change and to grow, and you're not stuck where you are. And so often what it's about is about reframing the way in which you're thinking. So if a student says to him, you know, I'm in my class, everybody else just seems to get it, and I'm sat there and I don't know what's going on. We do like to suggest that that's probably unlikely, and then try and do something concrete with them. Actually, you know, talk to them a little bit about their feelings, what's making them feel like that, and then actually, you know, 2 or 3 practical things that you can do over the next week or 2 just to make some improvements, and then we check back with them to make sure those things that are happening and actually help them. One of the most important things that we keep saying to students is, you know, you're not good at it yet. You know, the whole point of coming and learning with us is to learn new things. If you already knew how to do everything, there would be no point. And so it's about them actually accepting that learning is about discovery. It's about not being totally sure about what you know at the moment, and then making steps, working with teachers and with other staff in the college to actually make those changes and improvements. Sometimes we have people in denial. You know, we're saying to students, you need to do lots of independent study. They go, oh, nobody does that. And we suggest that they perhaps, 1, have a bit of a reality check, and 2, talk to second year students about what they'd recommend and what they've learned along their journey. Revision nearer the exams. It's a well-known fact that kind of reviewing work regularly in short stages helps things stay in your memory, and so we talk with students through those processes. And then there's a few more things that we again work through with students. My favourite one that students do say every year is the bottom one. And you'll quite often see somebody who is not going particularly well for. It's a little bit of a defensive moment. It's okay, don't panic. At the moment, I'm seeing how well I can do without putting any effort in, and then I'll be able to see how well it goes when I really, really try. Again, we try to gently suggest that doesn't work particularly well, and you know, and putting effort in does really, really give you some real benefits and rewards. Stuff around organisation and calendar is really important, and I'll come on to that a little bit later on. So communication's really, really important. We're a large college, and particularly in this COVID area, a lot of stuff has had to come out electronically. Students hopefully will now have set things up on email. If they're having particular IT issues with that, if they talk to their personal progress mentor in the first instance, they'll be able to point them in the direction of where to get some extra help and support with that. There are digital displays around the college that the students will get information from. There's the various college websites, our virtual learning environment, Wqe Online, our college website. Stuff comes out on the college Twitter and by text to students in terms of communicating with them. One thing that you might not be aware of yet, but will become increasingly important, is Pro Portal. This is the place where students can look at the marks and the assessment grades that they're getting from their various subjects. When we collect information from subjects that that ask about how things are going. Again, students can see all that on Pro Portal. And what we would really encourage is for you to work alongside them, get them to log on to their Pro Portal, you look over their shoulder and have a look at how things are going. And the other thing that we will say is that in terms of communication, we are working with students as they transition from being, you know, children through to being adults. And our aim is by the time they leave us, for them to be ready to operate independently in the world. We understand they're on a journey with that. And so we will, over time, move towards pointing out the opportunities that are in front of them, signposting them towards things, rather than just saying to them, you must just get on and do that. But that's not to say that on occasions we will go, actually, what you need to do is just get on and do what we're suggesting you do. This is the point when I really am not trying to teach you to do your job, but really from the college's perspective, we really value the partnership with you. But sometimes parents and carers feel that certainly as students move towards being 17, 18, they feel somewhat more removed. That at one level is a natural part of life as the parent of a teenager as they grow older. But from the college's point of view, we really want to keep working with you, but working in partnership with you and with the student. So we talked about Pro Portal, really helpful. And Paul's already highlighted the fact that the personal progress mentor is the real person of contact if you've got something that you want to ask about. So they're the person who will then either answer things directly or pass things on to other members of staff within the organisation. On our parent care section of our website, there is a whole range of things. We're trying to keep up to date with all the letters and communications that are going out. One key bit of information that's on there is the Parent Carer Handbook. It's got lots and lots of answers to the various sorts of questions that parents and carers often ask. And a really key bit of it is the back cover, which gives the dates of some key things through the year. One of the questions that popped up on the side was, are there parents' evenings? And yes, there will be a parents' evening. The one for students in their first year of A-level study is in the end of January, beginning of February in 2021. And the one for students who have joined us and are on one-year courses, so retaking GCSEs or studying at level 1 or entry level, is partway through the autumn term, so this side of the Christmas holidays. Okay, again, an activity that we actually do with students, and just trying to say to them, basically, it's actually worth doing some work. We know you don't really need to say that, but on occasions we feel the need. So we put in front of them some real students and we say to them, okay, basically all these people got the same grade at GCSE. What sort of grades were they getting at the end of their first year in college with us? And what our main point is to say to them that some of them have had a smooth journey. Some of them are perhaps not done as well as they were hoping to in the first year. And then we open up a conversation with students about what sort of factors might affect how you do in a particular subject, what things are under your control that you can actually make sure that you're getting the grades out of things that you were really hoping to. And so one of our other kind of ongoing themes is basically change what you can change and don't get overly hung up on things that you can't, and just accept that there are certain things that you cannot actually alter. But you can make massive strides by changing what's under your control.
Andrew, could you just pause for a question there?
Yeah, I can try.
We've had a question about the risk of dropout during the emotional fog stage, and perhaps be helpful for you to share what we might be doing to try and help students.
Dropout during the emotional fog stage. I'd say that's not something that we experience that often. What we would really say is that the times when we do find students drift away is when they are in an emotional fog, but they're not actually sharing that with us. And so really key in all this is for them to be actually open and communicate with their PPM or their teachers. And part of it from our side is to have said to them that an emotional fog it's not something to be ashamed of. It's just what happens to some students, and just talk to us about it. I think from your point of view as parents and carers, if you are seeing at home, they are in an emotional fog, but they're not actually sharing that with us, hopefully with their permission, say, well, would you like me to get in touch and just highlight that there's an issue there? And if they're really resistant to that, probably I would say, again, still get in touch with the PPM, and we can work our way through actually giving some help and support that's, as it's necessary. Okay. So we would say you can't really change, where you live or responsibilities you might have outside of college or which teacher you get, but you can actually change a whole variety of factors and work effectively on making the best of where you are and making real progress. So with students, we talk through in some depth about the things down the right-hand side, the different factors that they can actually influence. None of them are new and unusual, but it'd be amazing how often when a student's not doing quite as well as they were hoping to, they'll point to the stuff that they can't change, and what we would want to be trying to work with them on is actually refocus on what is in your control and making small steps to actually make improvements with that. So just a little bit of information about how the college actually reviews progress with students and just checks where they're up to. And again, all this information will be on Pro Portal, and we'll also email out regular updates for you as parents and carers. So we set what is called a minimum expected grade, which is basically on average, if a student has a certain set of GCSE results, what are they likely to achieve if they were to do what the average student in the country does by the time they're at the end of their studies. And then because we're ambitious for the students, we add half a grade to it and say, right, that's where we want you to be going for as the minimum. That's not us setting a ceiling on it saying, no, that's all you can possibly achieve. That's just saying that should be the minimum that you go for. We'll talk through with the student what their ambitions are. And at various points through the year, we have things called progress points. Again, the dates of those are detailed on the back of the parent carer handbook. And they help us to work out whether the student is actually on track. Students have access to all those on Pro Portal. And then they're followed up by the PPMs with some action planning around ways to actually make improvements where they need to be made, or the kind of, right, let's keep going with what seems to be working really well. So if you wanted a one-slide summary of what we're trying to work with on students is to developing them in a growth mindset and contrast that with them and try and move them away where it's possible and from a fixed mindset. Had a few questions on the discussion about the fact that students seem to be getting a lot of work to do out of class, and that's is that sort of normal or usual for advanced level study? So basically, we would suggest that roughly the same amount of study out of class as is happening in class. So from the face-to-face and online sessions, the students got about 4.5 hours of contact with staff. And so we'd be suggesting that they ought to be spending 4 or 5 hours of their own independent study time per subject. So that gives you a rough idea. We would do this activity with students in a little bit more detail, but I'm going to move through that one today. So approximately, if you're a real mathematician, you work out that 4.5 times 3 doesn't actually equal 15. But for the simple ones amongst us, 15, it's easy to divide by 3. That's roughly 5 hours per subject. that if they're doing between 4 and 5 hours per subject out of class, that will stand them in the, they'll do really well. We slightly joke with students that if they could get out some cold hard cash at this point and pay for their grades, how much would they be paid to pay? And then we move on to the fact that they do have a currency that they can actually involve in this, and actually that is the amount of time that they put into things. So here's a question. The young person that you have in your house, when they leave the house, do they ever look anything like this? Or does their bag and their bedroom floor look anything like the middle picture? We would be suggesting to students that all of these approaches probably aren't going to work. The mobile phone, makeup option, possibly your college card if you've remembered it, in the small bag doesn't really work. The file of stuff, everything in my bag, and it'll all be fine. It's in there somewhere. That's all I need to know. Again, not very useful. The one that actually it's also not very useful is the massive, great big folder in which I put everything. For 2 reasons. One, it's a high jeopardy way of doing things. At some point, that folder will explode. The other side of it is that quite often people put it in chronological order and mix all their subjects up, and that causes all sorts of trouble. And so what we'll be telling students is that what they ought to be doing is either using a folder which they bring to college with separate sections for the different subjects, and that they then transfer out into a set of files at home to keep things separate. Or if they like things electronic and there's the staff that they're working with are doing a lot of things through Microsoft Teams and the OneNote notebooks that are in there, to actually they can organise an awful lot of their notes through that application. They can get that on their phone. If they've made some jottings and notes that they want to include in, they can just take a quick photo of it. They can integrate that with all of the information that staff are giving them, and that is a great way for some students to organise. You'll know from home whether the person the young person that lives with you is a paper and an organisation person, or is more of an IT based person. But either of those approaches works really, really well. The other point that is really helpful, both for study with us at Wqe and for whatever comes next, and for the rest of life, is to get themselves sorted so that they actually have a calendar app, a diary, they start to do some planning, they have some to-do lists with some deadlines, and we'll work through with those with students to kind of get them up and running with those. At home, it'd be really helpful if you could say to them, oh, you know, what deadlines have you got coming up in the next week? Or how are you going to remember that? You know, is there anything I can do to help? And just gently encourage them to get into good organisational habits. The bottom one, we will joke slightly with students, is what students often do if they work on paper is they get a pad of paper and then they write, you know, for one lesson on the first page, and then they go to their next lesson and they just flip over the pad and they write for the next one there, and then they flip over, and then in 3 weeks' time, when they're trying to look back for the thing they did 3 weeks ago, they'll be rifling back through all of those pages and trying to work it out. So to actually rip things out of the pad and actually file them separately, whilst it feels really fundamental, is something that there are a number of students who need a little bit of help with that. And so if you have somebody at home with a massive pad of paper just with stuff written on it all the way through, just a bit of gentle encouragement to actually separate those things off into the things that go together, it's really helpful. And then just finally to say that obviously students are with us only for a short amount of time, and our main job is to work with them so that they really, really love learning and discovery, that hopefully that stays with them for the rest of their lives, and also to set them up well for whatever comes next. But what we would often say to them is, particularly at the start of your studies, don't panic if you haven't, wanted to be an astronaut since you were 6. It's got, some students have got a really, really set goal and know where they're going. Many students really aren't sure. And that's often because they're fixated on, I must know exactly what job I'm going to be doing when I'm 35. But what we'd say to them is, actually, at this point, growth mindset is just think generally, what do you enjoy? What's possible? Don't be fixated on it's got to happen in this way. Many of us will reflect on life that we thought we were going to go, down this route where A would be followed by B by C. And what actually happened was we ended up going off down some different track and ended up getting there in another route. And we'll be saying to students, just entertain that all that is possible, and that is just normal, and that's fine. And at the moment, it may well be, I don't know what the plan is, but step by step, you'll work it out as you go along. I'm not going to labour the point, but there's a whole range of different progression options, and we've got a great careers team who work really effectively with students and to help them with that, and it will be a key part of what they do with their PPMs in those group sessions as well. So we've talked about personal progress mentors, welfare and skills. If students have got a particular additional need or need some welfare support, and we've got a team of specialists to help with that. And then I've talked about the careers team as well. One thing that we often say to students is this: we know we can't lie to you and say that studying is going to be easy, but genuinely, we are hoping that students really enjoy their time with us, and that the effort that they put in, they'll really reap the benefits, and it will be worth it. So that's a little bit of a flavour of some of the things that we'll work with students. Hopefully gives you some language that you might use with people at home. Obviously, we'll head now across to Q&A. Paul looks like he's been typing furiously.
I've been trying to type lots of answers, so if you, by all means, go back and look at some of those answers.
So I'm going to stop sharing now, and then we'll
because I'm riffing, I can't guarantee the punctuation and grammar of all that, so please, that's what it is. So one of the key questions, probably to start off with, Andrew, is there's been a couple of questions in here that I've left to this moment, which is around subject change and choices. So you want to say a little bit more about the processes we've got for that?
Yes, I can do. Right, so we hope that having good quality advice and guidance as students enroll with us will minimise the amount of subject choice that happens. And so what we say to students in the early stages, actually, you need to settle and get used to the subjects that you're in. And so we don't do any subject changes in the first few weeks. But equally, we understand that students do actually sometimes want to request a change, and that's right to do. And we don't want to wait too long, so they've got loads and loads to catch up. So we will have a short window where students can request a subject change if, having been to their subject for a couple of weeks, they're not really settled in it and they want to ask for something different. And so that process will happen shortly and will run. Students have about a week to request a change, and then we try and look at those requests within another week or so, with the aim that students will be in their new groups, if they are swapping groups and subjects, before October half term, which gives them a little bit of time over the October half term to do some catch up. The person who runs that process would want me to stress that change is not always possible, and there's some groups which are full and there isn't any space in them, and so they rely on somebody wanting to come out of that subject before we can swap somebody else in. And the other thing that we try and avoid is throwing the whole of somebody's timetable and all of their groups up in the air to fit in a change. We will do it as an absolute, last resort, but it worries us a little bit if students are just settling into 2 of their subjects. They're, suddenly in new groups with new staff at the same time as they're trying to start another subject, and that can be quite disorientating for students. So we take that on a case-by-case basis, really. And all that will be done via an online form, and information will come out to students on that over the next few days.
I'll just pick up one while you have a read at some of the others, Andrew, so to pick one
Yeah.
for yourself. But there's a question around how confident we are that students will cover their A-level material and the sort of contact time that they'll get to do that. There's a few themes around that. I've typed a few answers around those things as well, but it's cropped up as a theme. So the model we've now got, as I've described, is what we intend to sustain now, at least until half term and possibly beyond that, and depending on the circumstances as they unfold. Basically delivers very similar curriculum delivery time to what we would have traditionally done anyway. Clearly the model for that is different in that they're getting a very intensive 3-hour chunk of something with a secondary period of time around an online activity later on at a different point in the week. But broadly speaking, the time with teachers for that is basically very similar. And if you add to that we've dramatically increased the online infrastructure and the online learning and the structured learning around that as well, then we're very confident actually in the fact that we'll be able to deliver the curriculum in that way. And actually, you know, there's other questions in the Q&A there around whether we think there are positives and negatives of the online learning. And I touched upon that earlier. Actually, there's some incredibly significant positives of that. In that it's actually quite effective in terms of managing groups of students who want to focus on different aspects of it and to personalise that response to students. So some of the ways in which teachers will use their online teaching and learning is they might personalise and target particular groups of students, either to stretch them or to challenge them or to support others. And there's a greater degree of flexibility in that, and they can set activities in very different ways to different groups of students and be more personalised in the way that they do those things. Something that I've again responded to in one of the questions around this theme is staff have traditionally used flipped learning models, which we know from research are very successful in this age group of learners at this stage, really, where students are supported to do research through online means and external means. And actually what the teacher then does is facilitate them to interact with each other and to share and use that learning and to do something with it through a structured either on-site activity or through the digital means that we've got in the e-learning methods. And they're certainly research that we've got around that suggests that that's actually a very productive and very successful model. And actually it's very common in universities, which is often what we're preparing these students for as well, in terms of them effectively coming in and having been expected to do the research in advance. That we can begin to link the resources together digitally for them to do that. We can put them in clusters and teams. They can have particular nuanced specialisms of a topic and then bring them together with other groups in a different way and join those things up, and the teacher facilitates that. So we've been going through a phase of developing what we already did to make, I think, in many ways even better through some of the online means as well. Clearly the sort of interaction between students needs to be well managed by teachers to do that. Some students can of course hide, and we need you to probably help them feel more confident about those things. But staff have got ways in which they can expect students to contribute and share their work and deliver that. And actually the audit tools that we've got for that are much more powerful than they ever were in traditional teaching and learning, where students could hide at the back of the class and try and blag a verbal answer, but actually through online means they can't hide from those things. So again, there are positives and negatives to that, but we're certainly learning a lot about how to exploit the positives. So there's a range of different aspects in there that are around the curriculum delivery. I think probably the answer for parent and carer that's most important here is you need to work with them on it and support them with it, because not everybody will be confident, and the reality are they might be more confident than some of us in some of those things as well. So there's kind of both sides of that. But actually being engaged with them in that and talking to them about that and letting them show you what they're doing and how they're doing it is probably quite an important role now as parent and carer. So I don't know whether you've picked up a question or two, Andrew, that you want to pick up.
Probably just to pick up on what you were saying about the curriculum for the first year of A-level. It's probably also worth saying that staff have been planning their curriculum as well. And I know in certain subjects they've just switched the order of teaching just so that things that more easily fit into this blended model that are sort of front-loaded. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, but you might hope that by the time we're through to the springtime, that we might be in a different situation, and so that there is some shifting around of that as we've gone. And I think, as Paul said, we've set up a model which will flex, which I think we're expecting and we're hoping that this mix of 3 hours face to face plus online is what will be sustainable and happen for for a good amount of time. There's one question about how is it going? How would it flex in terms of the PM's announcement this evening? So our reading of this, I think Paul will probably want to say, is that if at all possible, they're going to keep schools and colleges open, and we fully support that. I think whilst we survived well with students doing everything off-site, we're firm believers that this blended model of being on-site face-to-face and with a mixture of online is a better model. So we're keen to keep that going for as long as possible. But clearly, we'll take the government and the local advice on what's the best way forward.
Just to echo that, really, I mean, we're very clear what we prefer as a model and what we want to sustain, and a lot of the fairly rigid controls that we've had to put in, like a subject today and like the class, effectively we've had to sit students in more traditional 1960s 70s rows facing forward in classes, and they're sitting in a rigid seating plan. We traditionally we'd put them in group work activities and they'd be very interactive in those structures, and we're having to do that part of it online, which comes back to are there positives of the online. You do group work more successfully actually in online forums now than perhaps we're allowed to do in a structured class situation. Certainly our view is, and there's nothing coming out of government that suggests anything other than they're desperate to keep education providers open and to keep young people engaged directly in our activities on site. Ultimately, most of the controls and restrictions that are being announced are about trying to sustain the things that government particularly want to keep happening, and certainly we're not hearing or seeing anything that suggests the contrary to that. So we're quite optimistic, frankly, about that essentially we've been guided in how we can do this. We so far have been very successful in doing it, and minimising any risks and challenges to young people, to keep them active and keep them coming in, and keep them positive and healthy and safe. So we'll continue to do that. Clearly, if a scenario arose where we were told otherwise, as Andrew says, we would have to flex and adapt our model, which is actually part of our planning, and that's a lot of what we've talked about this evening, about why we'd actually want to protect the online aspects of our learning, because if we ever have to flip quickly back to it, it's in place and students will be familiar with it. So that's what we're intending to do.
Okay, and if I pick up a few of the ones that, so there's one about, are there sports facilities available for non-team sports? Yes, in a normal world there are, and I also know that our sport department are working really hard on how they're going to do enrichment with students, sometimes at a distance, in terms of kind of suggesting sort of healthy lifestyle and things that students can be doing to support good physical and mental health. Then there's a question, do students need laptops for lessons? No, they don't need to bring one for a lesson. If they were to need one, then the college would make one available in class. A few students do prefer to work on laptops, and that's fine. They can bring those and use them. And then we have a few students who have particular needs where a laptop is helpful in terms of supporting their learning, and those students, we would hope, if they've been students who have that facility at school and we don't know about it already, please do get in touch with the PPM and they'll let our welfare and skills team know. But we hope that most students will have let us know that already, so that we can put those sorts of facilities in place. Then we've got our timetables, which are excellent, expected to continue after the PM's announcement. I think we've done that one. Do we record online sessions, and should we be concerned about privacy issues? We can record online sessions, but they are kept within our Microsoft Teams environment, which has got very locked down privacy settings and is entirely designed for an educational environment. So whilst those recordings are made, they're only available to the class, and they're tied down really tightly in terms of privacy. What else have we got? Where can I find out the exam board so that I can get the book for my daughter to help her? So
I'll let you do that one, Andrew.
Sorry?
I was just
trying to type that one, were you? Okay. Most subjects will give out a sort of an introductory set of information that will include things like exam boards, helpful books to use. Talk to your daughter, see if she's got that information. If she hasn't, we just really encourage her just to talk to a teacher and ask, right, okay, which exam board am I doing? So that she's clear about it, and then proceed from there. You may well also find that in terms of books, there will be an online resource that the college will have provided for many subjects. We've also got an extensive range of books in the Learning Resource Centre which students can borrow. So just check what's available through the college resource before you rush out and buy lots, I would say.
The other place, in the absence of that, the teacher is the best source of that, because if there's been any change since we originally published our course sheets and information sheets on our website, then that would obviously be highlighted by the teacher. But I believe they're on our course sheets on the website as well.
Yeah, they should be.
On the board. So.
I was trying to encourage the student to be a little bit in charge.
That's definitely the best place to go and get them to take control of that, and they should have a specification that they've been given, and certainly a program of study for that from their courses. So that should highlight those.
Okay, I think that's it in terms of questions coming through. So unless there are any others that people want to quickly type in, we will draw things to a close at that point. Thanks ever so much for joining us tonight. Really great to have you with us. And as we have said many times, any questions, please do get in touch with the students' personal progress mentor, and we look forward to working with you. So
there was also, Andrew, just one more that I responded to.
All right, okay.
Answer, which is probably quite an important one to finish with, which is can people access this these presentations that we've just done elsewhere, and will they be able to access the presentation more generally? And I think that's our plan, isn't it? So
yes, so this is being recorded, so that'll go up on the college website, and we will put copies of the presentations that both Paul and myself have done up on the parent carer section of the website as well. So I think we're finished in time to make a cup of tea before Boris is on the telly.
Absolutely. Okay. Great that you all managed to attend, and thank you.
Okay, thanks again for your attention this evening.